I am delighted for the opportunity to welcome a friend that I haven't known that many years, but I feel like I've known you most of my life, uh, Dr. Lewis Brogdon. First met him when he was at Bluefield College, when he was there as Associate Professor of Christian Studies. He currently serves as the research professor of preaching and Black church studies at the Baptist Seminary of Kentucky, and also chair of the Department of Religious Studies at Simmons College of Kentucky. Worked in a variety of institutions, as I said, Bluefield being one of them. Dr. Brogdon is an accomplished writer, and we'll make sure our viewers can find his bio and get that information. If I mention all the books, I'd be cutting into your time, but also he's a much sought after preacher and lecturer, whether it's on Dr. Martin Luther King or on other subjects. And the conversation that we want to have today is really sparked by the fact that I had the opportunity to read something that you recently wrote, The Fight for the Soul of America. And then after reading it, a version of it appeared in the Louisville Courier-Journal. And so that's what we really want to talk with you about. But as we start our interview, Angel Miner, my co-host, has some general questions that she wants to ask you, and then we want to get right into the fight for the soul of America. So Angel, you start.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Dr. Brogdon. My first question for you is, you had a lot of different positions and you have a wide background, from a professor to a preacher, consultant, author, panelist. What would you say is some of your favorite past positions you had and some of your favorite projects that you worked on as well?
You know, I think one of the reasons I'm most excited about the work that I'm doing now is that really a lot of my passions have all kind of coalesced around a couple of key positions. And so, you know, I got my career started out being a congregational pastor. So I had over a decade of experience just working as a pastor in local congregations, and really loved the work. A couple of things that meant a lot to me about doing that was the teaching aspect. That's something I'm very passionate about. I just believe that there's something deeply spiritual and almost miraculous about teaching. It's a gift to be able to inspire people to better understand their faith and to do good in the world. But I always had this sort of nerd thing where I would go in a little too much depth and sometimes lose the congregation because, you know, I'm kind of off dealing with some very minute things. And so I had some professors who said, you know, have you ever thought about grad school and becoming a professor? And I remember sitting in a classroom and seeing a professor write Greek on the board, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so I got my master's and my PhD, and eventually I was a Greek professor. So I had a wonderful opportunity, which Koine Greek is the language of the New Testament, the original language. So I love my years being a congregational pastor, very passionate about teaching, as well as offering administrative leadership in the college university setting, because that kind of leadership just makes learning possible. And so it's a different way to wear the same hat that I'm wearing. But my passion is really around writing and being a public intellectual now. And I think all of my years, whether it's working in congregations and being a professor, I think it's really prepared me that we're in a unique moment. And for some reason, you know, God has decided to use me among many other people to kind of be in the public square, helping people to understand what's going on and how we should respond to those things. So I do a lot of writing. I've written 7 books, and I'm closing in on 30 different articles that I've written over my career. And now I'm running my own institute, National Institute here in Louisville, Kentucky. I still do work at Bluefield College. I just do that part-time when I don't have other things to do. So I love it, yeah.
You recently just joined the Baptist Seminary in Kentucky. Why did you join it, and what have you gained so far being a part of it?
A few years ago, I had an opportunity to serve as a provost of a small HBCU, which is a historic Black college and university in Louisville, Kentucky. And I met the president, Dr. David Cassidy, during my time as provost, and Baptist Seminary of Kentucky. They're on both the campus of Georgetown College and Simmons College of Kentucky. And so, here is a white seminary that made the decision to not only have a campus, in a predominantly white college, but then to come into Black space. And they came into Black space not trying to take over. They came in to listen and to find ways to be real partners. And so it was just a real joy working with Dr. Cassidy and the dean. And then a few years later, we had conversations, and they got me back in Louisville. And so, I've been serving as a research professor. And then given my background, I always wanted to start a new institute there. And so we applied for a major grant from the Ball Foundation out of Texas. And we were awarded that grant last year for $750,000 for me to start the Institute of Black Church Studies. And so we have started that here just this summer, and the program, it kicks off this fall. So I'm really excited that you have a major foundation and an entire institution that believes in you, your vision, and your leadership.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Angel. The soul of America is in trouble. I think we could spend the time that we have on the show just talking about it's in trouble. But I'm thinking that we've kind of move ahead a bit and say, what do we need to do to heal the soul of America? I would think if there are those that are watching or saying that the soul's not in trouble, we can have that discussion, that disagreement perhaps, and I would be on the same side of the issue as Dr. Brogdon. But what do you see? What do we need? What needs to happen? And this is a big challenge for you to say in a 30-minute show, but what do we need to do?
Well, I think to a large extent, we really have to begin by understanding what is going on today. And we're in the information age, we're in the age of social media, we're in the age of advanced technology, and that affords us a lot of benefits. But there's almost so much information that people don't have perspective. So there's a text in the New Testament that talks about this that I think is a helpful sort of frame of reference for us. Paul wrote a letter to a young pastor named Timothy, and he says that in the last days, perilous times would come. And when he starts describing what's going to happen during this time, he says people will be ever learning, but never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. And I just think that is a text that is so apropos today, that there's so much information out there. There's so many people talking that people don't have real perspective. And so they're grabbing onto almost any and everything and trying to run with it. So we're in a very sort of chaotic moment. So you do have to understand. So what the op-ed does, and I want to say that there's an op-ed you can look up on the Courier Journal that I've written that's entitled, "Is America in Danger of Losing Its Soul?" It was a front page in the forum section. It's also been picked up by a whole lot of other newspapers across the country. Good. You can also go to institute.bsk.edu, and I've written a fuller, over 5,000 word essay that really goes in much more depth about the issues. So there's a national conversation that's been going on for quite some time that there's something deeply wrong with what is going on in America. Humans, we just have this ability to become maladjusted. We can just adjust to almost anything and just think that things are normal. And things that are transpiring in this country, this is not normal. What happened at the Capitol on January the 6th, that's not normal. Having a past president who was on Twitter intimidating people. These are just things that we've gotten used to, and we just think these things are normal, and they're really not. And this dysfunction that we're seeing in this country, that we're all participating in different ways. So I wrote the op-ed to join this national conversation but to join as a religious scholar, as a religious leader, as someone who brings a different vantage point and a different angle to some of these issues. And so I think I did a really good job of just mapping, okay, here are some of these major problems. But then as a religious leader, I have an opportunity to go a little deeper. And so there are two really sort of core issues that we have to come to grips with. The first I dealt with in the op-ed. The second you'll have to read in the extended article. The first is the problem of hate. I use the language of the problem of othering. It's almost a new form of racism that allows us to categorize other people, no matter what the category is, and to use that category to justify mistreating them. And so, yes, it encompasses the old Black-white racism that has been a deep part of the history of this country, as well as other immigrant groups. It's even in the partisan environment that we are in. If you are of a different political party, some people feel emboldened and justified to then treat you a certain way based on your party affiliation. And so when you have this thread and this undercurrent of hate, it makes it incredibly difficult to get anything constructive and productive done in this country. And you can just look at how we handled the pandemic. And as just the most recent sort of case study, that we are so at each other's throats that we can't work together, even when lives are at stake. So I wrote to really try to help people to kind of understand that, yes, we have our differences, and I think differences it's healthy for a democracy, but the sort of undercurrent of hate has to be addressed, which is why I think you'll need that second article to then look at that the religious community has a responsibility in this, and we have to stop being the puppet of the state and start being the conscience of the state, something that Dr. King talked about back in 1963, that it is our job to be the conscience of the state and not always endorsing everything that the state does, so that when the state gets off track, we're kind of there to help it get back on track. And so that's some of the work that I'm trying to do. So it's when we understand these issues that then we're able to say, okay, here's what we need to do. I think every American needs to have a conversation about our national character, that it needs to get beyond the problem with America. It's always somebody else. It's always that other group. We need to start having some hard and honest conversations about the ways we are all participating in the dysfunction that is so rampant and widespread in this country. And I understand that some people are participating in more, in deeper and more profound ways than others. But there is no escaping that we are all participating in the dysfunction at some level. And we need to kind of have some conversations about how can we, in spite of our differences, be a better country. And if every American starts having some kind of conversation, and if leaders start thinking about some of these issues, it allows us an opportunity, I think, to pivot and to go in a different direction. I believe we need a movement, but a movement always starts small. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is to just encourage people to have some important conversations. There are some things my National Institute is doing and planning to do more of to help facilitate and to spur further conversations like town halls, public service announcements, things that start helping us to think differently about each other and how to work together for the greater good of society.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And toward the end of that longer document, you have this sentence: we do not talk much as a nation about forgiveness. And I think as that leads off that paragraph about talking about forgiveness, and then moving beyond the talking about it, to doing it, there's clearly where your practical and your theological perspective comes in. And say something to us about forgiveness, please, sir.
Yeah, and the reason I put that in is because, you know, it was in a section that was talking about, one of King's most popular sermons was How to Love Your Enemies. Because if you think about the genius and just the depth that Dr. King brought to the work that he did, King ran a movement on a platform of nonviolence and love. And King was constantly met with resistance, with people who were antagonistic, people who were hateful and violent against him. And so King was very, very principled in his approach, that he was never going to respond with violence that's both physical violence as well as verbal violence. You know, get into these shouting matches that we see so commonplace in society today. King was able to do that because he looked at a passage out of the Gospels, out of Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus talked about loving your enemies. And one statement that King made was that no matter what your enemy does, no matter what they believe, it never represents the whole of who they are. And if you kind of understand that there's always more to people you disagree with than just the point you disagree with, that you're able to see them in a little bit more of a holistic light, then you can realize, okay, we disagree about some things, but that person can be a loving father, a loving mother, someone's brother, someone's sister. There are people who care about this person. So there's more to them. But we're kind of in this moment where we like to reduce everyone down to a single issue or the worst sort of episode in their life. And as a nation, we really don't talk about forgiveness. We like to hold things against people. We like to define people by very, very specific things and sort of reduce them to that. And again, when we're talking about the public good, the greater good, when we're in the public square, reducing everyone down to, oh, well, if you disagree with me about this issue, then you are this and only this. We need conversations in this country about, we can have some disagreements. There can be some slights and wrongs that have been done. But this country, and I don't believe this country is a Christian nation. It has been deeply influenced by the Christian religion and the Christian faith. And so we should have some conversations about forgiveness, about letting go of wrongs, about being willing to let someone move beyond where they were at a given point. Because even some people want to change and they want to grow, and we won't let them. Well, if you supported that candidate back then, I'm never going to talk to you again. Well, where are we going to get if people can't admit that they were wrong, or that they're growing, or that they're changing? This is some of the work I do when I deal with the legacy of racism and slavery. There are many white Americans who they didn't know about certain things. And so when you start educating them, then you've got to give them an opportunity to grow and to move. And it's almost like some people, no, because you didn't know back then, you didn't do anything, you're always a part of the problem. And so it just leaves us trapped in this vicious cycle. And it just precludes any possibility for us building a different kind of future. And so I wrote the op-ed to kind of say, we need a movement that's going to be big enough for us all to be able to move forward together. Because King's last book was, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? We have embraced chaos. I am arguing, just like King argued in 67 and 68. We need to move towards community, building a nation where we can all live together.
To have that community, I think it's outstanding that Baptist Seminary of Kentucky, as you said, is on 2 campuses, and you explained how they moved into one without trying to change, but to be there. If the 11 o'clock hour on Sunday morning is still the most segregated hour in America, if that still be true, someone watching this and hearing your comments and saying, I'd like to work on this, but it's maybe a challenge for some to work on it if they don't interact with people who are of a different race, a different agreement. They say sometimes we stay in our own silo, we stay in our own family, we stay on our own comfort zone. So again, give us the challenge, please, sir. What do we need to do that we can move forward in this movement, as you say?
David, that is a great question. Well, okay, so in the longer article that I wrote, where I talk about the sort of crisis that American Christianity is experiencing, is, we have become the puppet of the state instead of its conscience. Now, nowhere is that more apparent than in how Christians decide to organize themselves religiously, how they decide to congregate. We do so very strictly along the lines of race. And it's just so bizarre, David, that you can go into sports, you can go into business, you can go into education, and you're going to be in much more integrated spaces. But then when you go into the space where you claim to be worshiping the same God, we have to do that so strictly along the lines of race. And so we're just in this sort of moment of historical reckoning where Christian leaders have to be honest that we have really failed to live up to the best of the vision that we believe God has laid out in Scripture and what it is that Jesus, is standing for and stood for 2,000 years ago. So I think, yes, we can admit that we failed, but we don't have to remain stuck there.
Right.
We can find some practical ways to try to bridge the racial divide as it relates to our congregations. I would encourage my white sisters and brothers, just like BSK did, and they moved out of white space, and yet they're still in white space, but they moved into Black space. And so what happened with integration was really a select number of African Americans being allowed into white space. It was never whites wanting to come into Black space. So we need more models and more paradigms of white leaders, white institutions, white individuals, white families, finding ways to come into Black space and to get to know their African American neighbors. And so what would it mean to think about, hey, we're going to go to this African American church. We're going to go to this church, not just for a Sunday, not just for a special MLK program. What would it mean for your membership in an African American church? Or what would it mean for you to go to an HBCU and to audit a course or to take a course for credit to learn about African American history? Because you can't love your neighbor if you don't understand who your neighbor is. And so then the onus is on members of the majority culture to also want to build some of those bridges, and it can't always be members of the minority culture who we have to come into white space because everything is mostly still controlled by white power, white wealth, etc. So it's kind of coming into these other spaces and building friendships and partnerships and doing some of this work that allows us to better understand each other so that we can find some practical things that we can do together to build a better future. Because one of the reasons we're in such a contested racial moment is because churches haven't been exercising leadership. We haven't been in each other's homes, each other's communities, and each other's churches enough to offset everything that began to unfold once an African American became president of the United States. So it really just exposed Christianity. And so, we're kind of in a moment where we have to be honest, but that's okay. That's part of what it means to be a Christian. We confess our sins. We own it. We say, yes, we failed. We fell short. We missed it, but we want to try to get it right. And so that's, again, one of the reasons why I'm out here doing some of this work to encourage us to move beyond the sort of crisis moment that we're in to something more healthy and constructive. And we can do it, and there are models of people doing incredible work around this country that just maybe they're not being highlighted because, of course, the news cycle only wants to focus on things that are negative. But there's some people doing some great work, and we need to amplify that and just continue to galvanize ourselves around things that are good so that we can chart a different path.
You brought back to mind the refrain from that song, "We Shall Overcome," the part that says black and white together, we shall overcome. Not black separate, white separate,
Yes.
but together. And Dr. Brogdon, your words are very inspiring and they're also very challenging. If folks want to get in touch with you and find out get more suggestions from you or read those documents, we'll make sure that they can get those links, that they can get that information. Angel, before we would come near a time of wrapping up what could go on for the entire day, did another question come to your mind that you want to ask Dr. Brogdon?
Yes. There was some controversy over making Juneteenth a national holiday. How do you feel about it?
I have mixed feelings about it. I'm happy. I'm happy that we did it because I think it's important to honor those sort of important historical markers, not just in Black history, but in American history. But also have mixed feelings because there's always this tendency to just want to do ceremonial things instead of really address structural issues. When you enslave people for over 240 years, then followed by another vicious system called Jim Crow, another 100 plus years. So most of the history that African Americans have been in this country, they were legally oppressed. Okay, so in other words, it was legal to do these things. So the legacy and the suffering and the inequities, if you're going to correct those things, it's going to require more than just, putting a memorial of Dr. King up in DC and honoring Juneteenth. You have to do some things that are structural. And this is why King focused on the Poor People's Campaign toward the end of the Civil Rights Movement, because he was dealing with economic inequality. Because that's the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. It's Black poverty. And by 2053, Black America will be at zero wealth. We're at 2.6% of the total wealth. We're 13.4% of the population. We have the same wealth today that Blacks had when they left slavery in 1865. So we really need more than just ceremonies. We need public policies and things that are going to correct this legacy. And if you're interested in any videos, I have a YouTube channel. You just look up Lewis Brogdon on YouTube. And I have, probably 30 to 50 videos of just webinars, panels, different things that I've done. There's even a documentary I produced called Slavery in Black and White. Go to institute.bsk.edu for more information on the Institute of Black Church Studies that I run. And then you can always Google me and find me and look up books and things that I've written. It has just been wonderful having conversations. Any other questions I can answer?
We could. Yes. We certainly thank you for the time you've given us today, and thank you for the leadership that you're providing. And we do want people to dig in and find out more information that you can provide. If they're not getting it in their communities where they are, to know that there are sources where they can get it. So we thank you very much, and we look forward to staying in touch with the work that you're doing.
Thank you for the invitation, David, Angel. You all have a wonderful day.